with the Prime Minister. This is the campaign launch 2022. G'day everyone and welcome. This is the Liberal Party campaign launch 2022 pre-show. Now, this will be held at 11:30 at the Brisbane Convention Centre. It starts at 11:30 and we'll be getting a live feed very soon. Sorry, pardon me. Righto, so we're going to get right into all that, and the Prime Minister's just sent out a media release regarding financial help for pensioners. All right, and Labor are just finishing up, I believe, their campaign launch right now. And once there's a live feed, we'll make sure to bring that in. Before I get into all that, I've got to make sure the stream's running good. So let me know how everything's going. Is it all G? Just let me know. Audio's working good. Just let me know on the live chat, please, guys. Okay. Now, so we're going to be getting a live feed in very shortly, if we can find one. But there's also a very important reason why I had to come on here today. Now, I got the email to fill out the form on the portal to be on the ground at this campaign launch, right? So, because I wanted to do media work there live from the ground. Right. Yeah. So what I did is I filled out the form and they wouldn't get back to me with the event details. So I gave them a call. First time, they hung up on me. Don't know. Could have been an accident. Second time, called them again. They told me no. Yeah, it's not. They told me, yeah, we'll follow that up for you. And third time, they just told me no, and they told me that they won't. They will send me a message whether I can come in, and they texted me no. Now, media should be able to come to these events to hold the leaders accountable and to help spread their information to the public, I believe, myself personally. Now, we're going to try to find ourselves a live feed here, but we do definitely have a live feed from the Labor launch, but we're looking at we want to see the Liberal campaign launch. All right, so it should be starting relatively soon. I'm just going to put it back on the starting soon screen for a bit, and then we'll come back when it's time.
for 3.5 years. How can he say, I'm going to show some more empathy now? And anyone can believe it. It just looks like a ridiculous talking point dreamed out of a focus group, to be perfectly honest with you.
Yeah, I don't think it is. I mean, all of us, when we went into the pandemic and sitting around the cabinet table, you felt a huge responsibility and there was a sort of a quiet determination to make sure we steered the country through it. And there was a sort of a steely resolve that we've got really one job and that's what we've got to do and that's got to be our absolute focus. But I think as we have come out of it, there is now an ability to basically say, no, we need a little bit of a different approach because, you know, we were worried that a lot of Australians were going to lose their life. And you carry that weight with you. And I think the PM more than any really felt that if you don't get this right, people are going to lose their lives. And so that responsibility lay very heavily on him. And I think now as we've come through it, we've still got challenges, but I think you can go back to a little bit of a different style. And I think that's what he's saying.
What has the government got to do in the last week to win?
We've got to present that positive case, that positive message of why it's so important, given the economic circumstances we find ourselves in, that we build a strong economy. That is the absolute key for the next 6 days. So people go into that polling booth and go, you know what, I think we're on the right path. I think we've got to stick with what we know and how we're going. We've got to stick with the people that we know can manage the economy, that it's in their DNA, rather than someone who, Anthony Albanese, you're just not sure. And why would you take that risk if you're not sure? If he just doesn't feel right, the economy.
We're introducing the PM this afternoon here in Brisbane.
As you just heard there, Dan Tehan really pushing, saying that positive message is what the government has to be putting through for the next 6 days. So we expect Scott Morrison to be putting forward his vision for Australia, outlining that, but also trying to stick on that more optimistic note. But Kieran, it really was quite the pivot because we've had Scott Morrison throughout this entire campaign being quite negative, attacking the opposition, saying it's better the devil you know than the one you don't know. But now as he goes through this, I guess, journey of reinvention, really shifting to a more positive note. So will it be enough to shift the dial, or is it too little too late, as some say? Well, only time can really tell. But here now we have the party faithful starting to fill the room as they await for Scott Morrison to address them for the Liberal campaign today.
Andrea, who else are we expecting in there today? I've heard John Howard. Any sign of Tony Abbott? And what's the feeling like on the bus, on the road at the moment? Because we've heard a bit today, even though some other Liberals are pessimistic, there's a view that the Morrison camp still gives itself hope.
Yeah, well, on the first one, I have been asking around to see if Tony Abbott is turning up. I haven't been able to get a clear answer on that one. We do know, as you said, that John Howard will be in attendance, of course, the last Prime Minister to actually serve a full term. But, Andrew, in terms of the mood on the bus and the mood that you're seeing out on the hustings, we know that no one backs Scott Morrison as much as Scott Morrison. If anyone believes he can win, if anyone believes he can turn this around and pull off another miracle, so-called miracle election win, it will be. He is the one who'll be backing himself right until the end. But he seems to be a few brave faces in some areas, but certainly when it comes from the Prime Minister himself, he's very confident, or at least appearing to look so.
Andrea Crothers, thank you for that. And as Andrea said there, Andrew, before we get back into the launch, Scott Morrison has to believe it. Otherwise, I mean, how does he get through the last week? But you and I can tell our viewers that here in the room, it's a very different mood among those you speak to privately that this is a very tough election. How it was put to me privately, saying that we've got to make the best of it, essentially. That to me sounds like they're in save the furniture mode.
Well, I think we've shown some of the internal polling. You see the news poll. The primary vote hasn't moved since August. You know, even in the hung parliament in 2010, the primary vote of the coalition was 43. Now it's 35. Our colleague Peter Credlin wrote a column today saying, look, think carefully if you're United Australia Party or One Nation voting, make sure your preference goes to the Liberals. That's fine. But that's about 9-10%. The coalition primary's at 35. Even with margin of error of 3, let's give them an extra 3. That doesn't hit your 50. Whereas with Labor, you've got 38 Labor or 39, 11 Green. 9 of those 11 go to Labor. Then independents. They're just behind. The interesting part about it is Labor's primary vote won't be high as well if those polls are borne out on polling day. But Labor's vote currently is 5% higher than it was at the last 2 elections. But as Kieran's reporting, what we've been hearing in the room today isn't your normal, we can still do it, it's tight, it's not even, we've got a chance, you guys are going to be wrong again. You hear that a fair bit over the... Yeah. It's more like we're just fighting, right?
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. We're just fighting to the end, and not that sort of message about we've got a clear path, we can do it, we can, it's
I heard one pathway comment.
But it's a very different energy to 2019. Who knows? Scott Morrison might do it. He's pulled off a miracle before. Who knows? We could all be wrong again, but I tell you what, it's a different mood here today than it was.
I guess the point
previously.
you're making that if Scott Morrison does do it, some of his people are wrong. Some of the Liberals are wrong that are talking to
Exactly.
us. That's kind of the point we're making.
Well, exactly right. Yeah. Let's have a quick listen to Anthony Albanese. He's holding a rally, trying to take a bit of the limelight off the Liberal launch. We'll get back to the Liberal launch as soon as it can.
Yeah, we will do that. We'll go into Anthony Albanese's. Anthony Albanese is live at the moment, and Scott Morrison will address the crowd at his launch very soon. But of course, we'll go to Albos first, if we can find that. Anthony Albanese. All right. Crossing live to that one now.
They know that the alternative Prime Minister of this country will stand with battlers when they ask for an extra $1 an hour in their pay packet. And they know that Scott Morrison wants a real wage cut for people who are on the minimum wage of $20.33 an hour. And failed on bushfires, and they know that he failed on floods. They know he didn't order this. They know that the only time he thinks of
Just an Albany. Now, of course, the
Australia there, and we know how to get Queensland there. With a Labor government that holds no one back and leaves no one behind. A better government that will deliver a better future. Thanks very much.
Bringing you every big moment from the campaign trail. This is the Sky News Election Channel, Channel 603.
Live from Brisbane in Australia. This is Brisbane 2022 campaign launch. Live from Brisbane, this is the Coalition campaign. Election 2022.
Economy. You look at the measures.
They were temporary. Petrol's already up.
Yep, look.
Inflation's up. Interest rates are going up.
Temporary, though, Andrew, you and I have discussed this. Why? Because we know so many of those things are as a result of global factors which will change. So you do need a government that understands that. Labor, they just throw money around with no care. We do things in a carefully considered way, which means that as we go into this election, is it tough? Of course it's tough. We're asking for a fourth term of government. But when you look at what that choice is, when you look at the fact that Anthony Albanese, I often say to people, imagine if you have an employee, 25 years in the business, but you never ever let him near the books. An employee, 25 years in the business, but you never let him lock up. That is what Anthony Albanese represents.
But he's got this message about the minimum wage, which resonates with a lot of people. Why shouldn't someone on $20 an hour get a pay rise to deal with cost of living?
We have already,
like that, it's hard to argue
understood.
against,
and the problem is, what can Anthony Albanese honestly do? We respect the decision of the Fair Work Commission.
He said he does as well.
Anthony Albanese is out there making up all sorts of figures. He didn't even know how many people in Australia were unemployed. What does that say? He guesses 5.4% when it is at 4%. That says over the last 2 years, has he been listening to the Australian people? Over the last 2 years, has he understood what employers in this country need to go through and have gone through?
Why is he ahead there?
And I am. And look,
It can only be because your leader is on the nose.
I'm going to disagree with you there. The only poll that ultimately does count is on election day. It really does. Last time, the only poll that did count was on election day. Again, we're out there every single day, as we should be. As we should be, because the Australian people expect nothing less. Explaining to them where we've been, where we are now, but also the positive future that we all have.
Why is Scott
under Scott Morrison
so badly on the nose, though? Because he's conceded that himself by saying, I'm going to be different after the election.
I think what Scott was saying is, and I think most people would understand, the types of decisions that we had to make, a global pandemic, a once-in-a-100-year event that necessitated very fast decisions, in particular, if you recall, 2 and a bit years ago. Closing down that border to China, tough decision, but the right decision. Closing down parts of the economy effectively, tough decision, but the right decision. But at that same time, saying to people, we now need to put in place those underlying policies to support employers and employees.
He's lost a lot of heart.
I'm going to disagree with you there as well. I think what we have shown is as a government, we are a strong government when you need a strong government. Going forward, we can now focus on those really positive investments that we've been making, but because of the pandemic, perhaps haven't been verbalised to the extent that they could be. So I look forward to, if we're given that privilege of governing again, really highlighting and working on those positive policies for Australians.
You've even half ripped off their slogan, haven't you? They're a better future, Labor. You're a stronger future.
We're an absolutely stronger future, and in particular when you do look at that choice. Take it back to, what did Labor promise the Australian people back in 2019? $387 billion in additional taxes. Just think the types of decisions they would have had to make in March 2020. They would not have had that capacity because of the burden they would have put on employers, employees and Australians. Because of the nature of how we've governed, we were ready for that rainy day. You never want a rainy day in politics. It did happen in 2020 because of the strength of our economy at the time, because of what we believe in as a government. Jump forward 2 years and we are in a very strong position as a country.
The government's approach on China, obviously China's much more aggressive than it was only a couple of years ago. We're dealing with a different set of circumstances, absolutely. But the government's language on it and sort of the forward-leaning approach, it doesn't always go that well in WA, does it?
Look, I think in Western Australia, we are, and we have always said, and in particular by right, Western Australians, in terms of that relationship in China, they really understand the economic relationship. And we have always said we respect the economic relationship. But when you go out and you talk to people in the street and you say to them, would you ever compromise your principles? They say No. And they do understand that is where Scott Morrison comes from when it comes to the relationship with China. We will respect that underlying economic relationship. But when it comes to national security, when it comes to the need for a strong leader who understands I will never compromise Australia or Australians, they also understand that is Scott Morrison.
How's WA tracking then?
Look, certainly the seats, so Swan and Pearce, obviously, great candidates on the ground. And I have to say, over the last 6 weeks or 5 weeks, they have done an outstanding job. They will still be tough on the night because we've lost both sitting members. And I think anybody knows across Australia, you lose a sitting member, you lose that name recognition.
Live now on the Sky News Election Channel.
Wow. Okay. Wow, I wish I got that reception in Kooyong. How's that? Oh, I really do. I really do. Well, friends, fellow Australians, 3 years ago, we said to the Australian people on the eve of the 2019 election that under the coalition, the economy would be stronger, and we delivered. We said that under the coalition, more people would be in work, and we delivered. That under the coalition, taxes would be lower, and we delivered. That under the coalition, essential services would be guaranteed, we would list more drugs on the PBS, and we delivered. And under the coalition, we would invest more in national security and defence, and we delivered. Despite the biggest economic shock since the Great Depression, the first global pandemic in more than a century, we have kept our promises to the Australian people. And we have an economic plan that is working, with a faster and stronger economic recovery than all major advanced economies around the world. Faster and stronger than the United States, the United Kingdom, France, Germany, Italy, Canada, and Japan. This is not luck. This is a result of an economic plan that is working. 400,000 more Australians in work today than when we came to government. An unemployment rate on path to its lowest in some 50 years. Female unemployment today at its lowest level since 1974. More people in a trade apprenticeship on record. More than 300,000 Australians helped into a home in just the last 3 years. Lower taxes for more than 11 million Australians, rewarding aspiration and rewarding hard work. And small businesses, more than 3.6 million of them, the backbone of our economy, seeing the lowest company tax rates in some 50 years. This is our record under the Morrison government. And Australians, whether they are a manufacturer in Melbourne, a hospitality worker in Hobart, or a tradie in Townsville, Scott Morrison and the coalition have had their back through the pandemic and have their back into the future. But this is not a time to put all those gains at risk with a weak Labor leader who over the last 35 days has shown himself to be completely out of his depth. He says, Anthony Albanese says he's eminently qualified to be Prime Minister because he was acting Prime Minister, wait for it, for all of 48 hours. Now, I never thought I would ever say it, let alone at a Liberal Party meeting, but thank you, Kevin Rudd, for making it only 48 hours. In an election about jobs, Anthony Albanese doesn't know the unemployment rate. In an election about cost of living, he doesn't know the cash rate. And in an election about economic management, he has not put forward one policy for independent costing by Treasury or Finance. And he wants to be your Prime Minister. The reality is, the Labor Party have not put forward their policies for costing because we know they cannot manage money. We know that they will always tax more. We know that they will always spend more. They committed more than $80 billion of additional spending during COVID, including $6 billion of taxpayers' money for people to get the jab, even though they've already had the jab. $21 billion of additional election commitments in just these last 35 days. $52 billion in hidden commitments and more than $300 billion in so-called policy platform commitments, the detail of which Australians will not find out about until after the election. And we know how they'll pay for it. They will dust off the $387 billion of higher taxes from the last election to pay for their commitments at this election. Higher taxes on Australian super, higher taxes on Australians' family businesses, higher taxes on Australia's income, higher taxes on people's superannuation, higher taxes on retirees, higher taxes on housing. Labor did it before, and given half a chance, they will do it again. So, ladies and gentlemen, my fellow Australians, this election is a clear choice. A choice between a coalition led by Scott Morrison, made up of Liberals and Nationals, that have delivered a stronger economy, that have delivered more jobs, that have delivered lower taxes, and that have a plan for a stronger future. And a coalition of Labor and the Greens, with the unions at the head table, which will only deliver a weaker economy, higher taxes, and fewer jobs. Politics is a serious business. You change the government and you change the economy. And the economy is fundamental to everything. This election is not a time to risk Labor with a weak and unproven leader. This is a time to re-elect a Liberal Nationals coalition led by Scott Morrison. Thank you very much.
Australian life radically changed again overnight as the Prime Minister announced a new raft of measures in a bid to slow the coronavirus.
The Australian economy is expected to take its biggest hit in history when Wednesday's national accounts confirm the nation is officially in a deep recession.
Around 600,000 Australians losing their job in the month of April alone.
We were warned it was going to be bad, and it was. And the worst contraction in Australia's economy on record.
Whatever came across his desk, he'd just be, right, what are we going to do about this now?
Australia, like the whole world, has been through a time that none of us thought we would face.
Bushfires, a plague, floods, and now a war. I mean, one crisis in a term of government is probably expected, but 4 is quite extraordinary.
You always have setbacks. You always have imperfect information. The first thing you have to do in those situations is not moan about it, but fix it, and fix it as fast as you can.
When the National Security Committee first received the briefings on COVID, it was confronting, I think, for all of us. Advice around tens of thousands of people dying, our hospitals being overwhelmed, the economy going into free fall, a loss of confidence, people losing their businesses and their jobs.
There were discussions about how this would look alongside the Great Depression and whether or not we would be dealing with unemployment queues and business failures to rival what occurred. The scale of potential disaster was enormous.
I was seeing the local shops just slowly closing up.
We need to do the following things, and we need to do them now. We've got a couple of weeks probably, and if we don't get these restrictions in now and have them functional over the next couple of weeks, well, we could be looking at exactly the same thing that we're seeing on our screens in other parts of the world.
Making a decision to close a country like Australia.
I remember the morning going through the morning briefs of what had been occurring. I was looking at this and I going, we've got to shut the border and we've got to do it now. We've got to do it today. And then I rang every single one of the premiers. I rang Sindra Dern as well.
To protect our nation, to ensure that we were going to be in a position for the best possible recovery.
People looked to government for help and for certainty. And I think that's where Scott really stepped up. You know, he was a leader at a time when nobody really knew what was going to come next.
I think what people don't see in Scott Morrison and what we see in a sort of a close leadership group or in the National Security Committee is just a complete calmness and an ability to methodically work through the options in front of us. And generally the issues that we're dealing with don't present easy options.
He's very good at getting across information very fast.
There was time and time again where Scott would sit down with the senior ministers and say, this could be the biggest decision that we'll ever make.
We were literally staring into the economic abyss, and the unemployment rate, Treasury feared, could reach as high as 15%. That would see more than 2 million Australians unemployed.
It was that conversation for them. What happens tomorrow? How am I going to keep my employees on? How am I going to pay my bills?
We responded with JobKeeper, which has been the most important economic response during this period.
JobKeeper was the single largest economic policy that has ever been implemented in Australia.
We were able to say to employers, yes, you've got to close your doors. Yes, you've got to close your doors. But what we will do is we will ensure you still have the capacity to maintain that really important connection with your employees.
It's helped put us in the position today where our economic recovery is leading the world.
People are relying on you, they're counting on you, and that is this job 24/7. The uncertainty we've seen in relation to national security, regional security, has been completely transformed.
We must be very clear about the actions of authoritarian states and the unacceptable nature of their efforts, whether it is to coerce or to intimidate.
He really has been in charge of steering the ship through some of the choppiest waters that you could possibly imagine.
I mean, he made a commitment when he became the Prime Minister of this country that his every single waking moment would be focused on the best interests of Australia.
But when you stack Australia up against pretty much any other country, we've done far better in saving lives, saving jobs, and putting the country in a far stronger position than most others.
This is an economic plan that is working.
We're dealing with a world that has never been more unstable since the time of the Second World War. We're dealing with an economy which has more moving parts and more risks, but indeed many, many opportunities that we have to seize. I was at a trade school the other day in Brisbane, year 11 and 12. I asked them, I said, how many of you are going to start your own business? More than half of their hands went. How good's that? That's why I love Australia.
And now, ladies and gentlemen, please give a very warm welcome to the Prime Minister of Australia, Scott Morrison.
Thank you all very, very much. How good? How good indeed. Australians all one and free. I acknowledge the Turrbal and Yuggera peoples, the traditional custodians of the land on which we gather today, and I pay my respects to their elders past, present and emerging. I honour all those who have served or are serving in our Australian Defence Forces, and I just thank them. I thank them for their courage, for their service and their love of our country. I also honour those who for the past 2 years in particular have come together to support their fellow Australians in times of great need. Our health workers, our researchers and the scientists, our emergency workers, our community leaders. We love our country. And we gather at a time today of great consequence and decision for our nation, for you, for your family, for our nation. And 3 years ago, we faced a very similar decision. At that time, I spoke to you about the promise of Australia and how I plan to keep it as Prime Minister. A promise that allows Australians quietly going about their lives to realise their simple, honest and decent aspirations, where you're rewarded and respected for your efforts and your contribution. I said, if you have a go, you get a go. An Australia where you are accepted and you are valued regardless of your age, your ethnicity, your gender, your sexuality, your level of ability, any needs you may have, your wealth, your income. An Australia where you can live in an economy that enables you and your family to enjoy the best possible living standards and be able to plan for your future with confidence. A country where you can live in an environment that is clean and is healthy. A country where if you or your family, God forbid, get sick, you'll get access to world-class and affordable healthcare. A country where your children get the best possible start in life, a great education, and they can grow up safe in our country. A country where older Australians are respected, where their savings are secure and they get the help they need. A country that honours the service and sacrifice of all those who gifted us our freedoms. A country that acknowledges our Indigenous Australians and strives to ensure that every single Indigenous girl and boy grows up in this country with the same opportunities as every other Australian. That's the promise of Australia. None of us could have imagined what followed that last election. We already knew drought many years, particularly here in Queensland. We had already experienced devastating floods, particularly up in the north of Queensland. But more would follow, as we know. And most recently, as with the fires, as with the cyclones, the pandemic, 1 in 100 years, and the global recession it caused. It's been one of the most challenging times we have ever known. But I'm here to tell you today that despite what we have faced, we have remained true to the promise of Australia, and Australia has prevailed. We have kept, as a government, the promise of Australia. And Australians, despite everything thrown at us, Australia has stood tall. Our economic growth higher than all other advanced economies. Our AAA credit rating intact, one of only 9 countries to do that in the world. The biggest budget turnaround, Josh Frydenberg, in over 70 years. More Australians in work than ever before. Unemployment at 4%, the equal lowest level in 50 years, and down from 5.7% when we first came to government. Youth unemployment Youth unemployment at 8.3%, down from a peak of more than 16%. On almost every measure, growth, jobs, debt levels, fatality rates, vaccine rates, Australia's recovery is leading the advanced world. But can I tell you, from my heart, and Michaelia Cash knows this probably better than anyone else, nothing fires me up more than seeing young people get into jobs. Nothing. You know, when Josh Frydenberg and I stood together before the Australian people in the early stages of that pandemic back in March 2020, we stood in my courtyard, our courtyard down the PM's courtyard in Canberra. Our nation was gripped by fear and uncertainty. We stood on the edge of an abyss. And as we stared into it, Josh and I were confident of one fundamental truth. If we backed Australians, Australians would prevail. And so JobKeeper was born, and the many other measures that followed, constantly supporting Australians to find their way forward. We kept our head in the crisis. We knew when to step in and how, importantly, and when to step back. We made sure we got it right as best as we could, but we weren't perfect and not everything went to plan. But you know, when it didn't, and while others were criticising, we just worked feverishly to turn it around and make up the ground. What followed was the largest economic and public health response in Australia's history. We gave our fellow Australians that assurance in those very difficult times that tomorrow would be okay. So they could say the same thing to their children, to their employees, and I'm quite sure indeed to themselves also. As a leader, this was a time for strength. It was a time for pushing through. I had one focus as your Prime Minister: save the country. And we did. And we did. We began setting up, though, at the same time. We just didn't stop with that. We began, even in the midst of the pandemic, to set up the opportunities for on the other side of the pandemic. You know, it's not just enough for Australians to just get through, to make it through. We knew that Australia's longer-term success would be determined by what we did during the pandemic to set up for success on the other side. And as you saw us battling this virus in real time each day, we were also preparing at the same time our country for the opportunities that we knew would come. We kept the apprentices in training, and we got more and more and more of them to join their ranks. We backed businesses, particularly small, family, medium-sized businesses, to invest in their post-pandemic recovery with record tax incentives to go and purchase new equipment that would enable them to take on the new business that they also knew would follow. We created the modern manufacturing plan to set up a new area in advanced manufacturing to take advantage of what we knew would be the changes to supply chains on the other side of the pandemic. We struck trade deals with the United Kingdom, with India most recently, and ASEAN nations as well. We got on with the building of the big infrastructure projects and got on with the detailed planning of the projects that would need to follow so we could move ahead. And we kept doing the work to guarantee essential services that Australians rely on, including $19.1 billion in our response plan to the Aged Care Royal Commission that I called, a plan that is now being implemented. We delivered a comprehensive and real plan to achieve net zero emissions by 2050 through technology, not taxes. And we acted decisively to keep Australians safe protecting our national security in the face of real threats and coercion, securing the most important defence agreement with the United States and the United Kingdom, known as AUKUS, since ANZUS was made more than 70 years ago. Friends, together we've been building an economic bridge to the other side during a time of great global uncertainty, and here we are. We now stand on a different edge to the one that I spoke of before, one that where fear doesn't dominate, but aspiration, something we know a lot about as Liberals and Nationals for the Australian people. This requires a very different approach from us as a government to the mode we've had to be in over these many difficult years. But it's also been one that we have been preparing for and we are ready to get on with if you give us your support next Saturday. We stand on the edge of a new era of opportunity. Better days are now ahead, but we cannot take them for granted. As a government, we have the higher gears to secure that opportunity. And I know our economic plan is working because Australians are working. And we're heading in the right direction. I also know Australians, they're tired of politics. It's been an exhausting time. And they've certainly had enough of governments telling them how to live their lives, and I agree. But now we must focus on the choice that you are making at this election, as it will have very real consequences for you and your family. And if re-elected, you will see me as your Prime Minister, our government and our nation hit that extra gear needed to secure our nation's future for those better days, to make things truly better, to step beyond where we are today and put this pandemic behind us. Only the Liberals and Nationals will be able to do this because we understand the Australian economy. You know we are not loose units on the economy. We're not uninformed or reckless on the economy. We know how our economy works. We know how to manage money. And those before us knew as well. And I acknowledge our former Prime Ministers here today, and John Howard and Tony Abbott. They showed us the way, and we follow that way. We know what government can do, and importantly, though, we know what it can't and it shouldn't. We have a proven economic plan that has been tested in the most difficult economic circumstances since the Great Depression, 30 times worse than the global financial crisis of more than a decade ago. And we will apply the hard lessons we have learned from these difficult times so we can take Australia to the next level. So that's where I'm focused, friends, on the future, on your future. And today, I want to speak about our priorities and plans for the future. As I said at the first day of this election campaign, I said this election is about you. It's about how we create the right conditions for you to reach your goals, the ones you have set for you and your family. By keeping our economy strong with more jobs, better wages and lower taxes, and putting downward pressure on those rising interest rates and rising costs of living that we all know are driven by those global forces we're facing around the world. By supporting more Australians into home ownership, in caring for their family, perhaps starting a business, contributing to their community and retiring with dignity. By guaranteeing those essentials that Australians rely on with record investments in Medicare and hospitals and schools and aged care and other services. By keeping our nation safe, by protecting women from violence and abuse, by keeping Australians safe online, especially our children, by taking on the social media platforms and big tech companies, by building our resilience to the impacts of the natural disasters, and investing in stronger defence and keeping our borders secure. We also know that as individuals, we can only reach our full potential with the support and the sense of belonging that comes from others, most powerfully expressed in the family. Strong families, they are the building blocks of a good society, indeed a great one. And we must ensure they provide the place for children to feel safe and to be loved. They teach us respect and support for others. Families are the transmission belts for our society's values and our culture, and in turn, community. And we believe in the power of local communities in all their wonderful diversity. And we understand how important faith and culture is to those local communities. You know, Australia is the most successful multicultural, multi-faith immigration nation on earth. We have achieved this because we respect and we value our diversity, yes, but we all know that together as Australians, we love this country equally and together with a patriot's love. Throughout this campaign, I've been inspired by that energy and spirit of so many communities right across Australia and well before that. Our mission is not to mould these communities into some government template or to put government at the centre of community life, God forbid, but to empower communities to create their own future and a strong economy. And we have a strong plan to achieve just that. Let me speak about that. We have a plan to create 1.3 million more jobs over the next 5 years, including 450,000 of those jobs in regional Australia. Since 2013, we've created over 1.9 million jobs in Australia, including 1.1 million jobs for women. Unemployment, as I said, is already at 4% and falling, and the Reserve Bank says we can get unemployment to 3.5%. Just think about that. We're approaching a point in this country where everyone who has the capacity and desire to work can get a job. A job. That's what gives you choices, the pride and the purpose and a future. And these are things we believe so passionately in as Liberals and Nationals. And by creating jobs, by driving down unemployment, by growing our economy and improving what business can earn because they pay the wages, we create the conditions for sustainable increases in wages. We all want to see wages rise, of course we do. But those who think you can just arbitrarily do it, you can increase wages some other way than the one I've just outlined to you, they don't get it. That approach only results in higher interest rates and higher costs of living, taking back any gains, leaving you worse off. Our plan to grow the economy, it begins with keeping taxes low and cutting red tape to drive the investment and enable Australians to keep more of what they earn. We've given clear commitments to the Australian people at this election. No new taxes on Australian new workers, on retirees, on superannuation. No new taxes on superannuation or on small businesses, on housing, on emissions, on electricity. No carbon tax. And in a resource state here in Queensland and to our great Western Australian friends and right around the country, no mining tax. And we'll keep that official speed limit that I put in place as Treasurer and Josh has continued to ensure we keep those taxes low, to ensure that we can keep expenditure under control and create more jobs, repairing the budget without increasing taxes. Under our plan, more than $100 billion in permanent tax cuts will be delivered over the next 4 years, helping Australians manage cost of living pressures, encouraging workforce participation, rewarding hard work and delivering a stronger economy. And together with lower taxes, we have a practical plan to deal with cost of living pressures. And can I tell you, the most important thing you can do to achieve that is to manage the government's finances well. If you can't manage money, you just push up the cost of living and you push up interest rates. And I want to acknowledge Simon Birmingham and Josh Frydenberg for the great leadership that they have shown in that regard in our team. You know, in the budget, we also announced a series of initiatives that soften the impact right now on cost of living, halving petrol tax, direct payments to pensioners, providing further tax relief. But we've also announced we're expanding eligibility for the Commonwealth Seniors Health Card to an extra 50,000 older Australians who've saved hard for their retirement and deserve a fair go. By freezing deeming rates to guarantee the level of income payments for around 450,000 age pensioners and 440,000 other payment recipients so they have certainty. And we're delivering that 10% cut per general script, which means that the maximum price Australians will pay for those PBS medicines drops by $10. Home ownership is one of the great dividends of a strong economic plan. It enables Australians to be able to own that home. It is deep in our party's history. And we have a strong plan to ensure Australians can do just that. For most, including Jen and I, it is the largest asset you will ever own. And it's a source of your security in retirement. Buying your first home, it's never easy. It wasn't easy 30 years ago either, but I must admit it's harder today, but it's something you'll never forget. Over the years, it has become harder, and that's why 3 years ago I said I wanted more Australians to be able to realise their dream of owning their own home. And we've delivered. I launched our Home Guarantee Scheme, which has allowed tens of thousands of Australians to buy their first home with a deposit of as little as 5% or 2% for single parents. You know, there's more than 2,200 single-parent families who have so far bought a home using that scheme, 85% of them single mums. It saved families on average 4 years securing their deposit and as much as 8 years in some cases. This is transformational stuff we've seen in the last 3 years. In the last 3 years, our policies, our housing policies, have helped over 300,000 Australians into home ownership directly through Home Builder, the First Home Super Saver Scheme, all of which were opposed by the Labor Party. We have helped 27,600 Australians accelerate their deposit savings through their super to get closer to that dream. And through $5.5 billion in low-cost finance to the National Housing Finance and Investment Corporation that I established as Treasurer to support 27,500 social and affordable dwellings being delivered by great community housing organisations across the country. But there is more we can do and must. And we've got to start with freeing up more homes for people to be able to access the supply of homes. And we know that for many older Australians, there comes a time that 3 or 4 bedroom house, well, it's just a bit big. It's more than what you need and more than you really want to look after anymore. And we want to remove the barriers to senior Australians downsizing to residents that better suit their needs and their lifestyle. And that's why we have allowed Australians nearing retirement to make a post-tax contribution of up to $300,000 to superannuation when they sell their family home. Now, this has helped to free up larger homes for younger families. But today, I want us to go further. And from 1 July this year, we will further lower the age eligibility for this to 55 years. Now, this will increase the opportunity for people to downsize and increase the supply of family housing stock in the market. Currently, when an older Australian sells their home, the proceeds of the sale are also exempt from the pension assets test for 1 year. But from 1 January 2023, we will double that. We will double it to 2 years, giving seniors more time to plan and help them look to downsize while maintaining their pension, so they don't have to worry about that. This will align the pensions assets tests for people not entering aged care with those who are, with a uniform 2-year exemption from the assets tests after downsizing, as well as giving senior Australians greater certainty and more time to adjust to those new circumstances. Now, our opponents have a different vision of home ownership in this country. The real difference is that Labor always wants to put the government at the centre of everything. We want to put you and your family at the centre. We want Australians to own their own home, not the government. So to ensure we can do that, today I want to announce to you the next stage of our plan to help Australians own their own home. We want to further help Australians get past what is the biggest hurdle on their path to home ownership. And we started this process with the Home Guarantee Scheme, and that is the difficulty of saving for a deposit and be able to use their own money to do it. And that's why a re-elected coalition government will allow first home buyers to invest a responsible portion of their own superannuation savings into their first home. This would apply to both new and existing homes, and whatever amount is invested will be returned to your super when you sell the home, including the share of the capital gain from the sale of that home. The maximum amount able to be invested under this plan is the lower of $50,000 each individual, or 40% of your total superannuation balance. Superannuation is there to help Australians in their retirement. The evidence shows that the best thing we can do to help Australians achieve financial security in their retirement is to help them own their own home. You can already use your super to purchase an investment property, but not your own home. Other countries such as New Zealand and Canada also have policies that allow people to use their retirement savings to help them buy their home. And under a Morrison government, you will be able to do that too. This is about increasing the choices available to you within your super. It's your money to allow you to invest in your first home. This will make sure that investing part of your super to purchase a first home will also, though, and importantly, because we've been careful about the design of our policy, we think these things through. We do not want it to affect your long-term savings for retirement. So this will responsibly ensure that the majority of your super remains in your existing fund and maintains the diversification of your savings. But this will be a game changer for thousands of Australian families who sit and look at that money on their balance and go, if only I had that to help me now. There is no limit on who can use it. You don't have to sell it if you get a pay rise or someone wants to go back to work full time. There are no complex rules about income thresholds or who gets what. When you're doing an improvement, you don't have to check with the government every time you go to Bunnings to buy a can of paint. Because it's your home and it's your super. This will make it a bit easier, you know, for Australians to buy their first home sooner, taking years off the need to pay rent and the challenges of saving, because it's tough. And it's going to get you closer to the life you want for you and your family. Only the Coalition has a comprehensive plan to help Australians realise their dream of owning their own home. And there are 300,000 Australians today who can attest to that fact. We have a plan also to back Australia's 3.6 million small businesses and create another 400,000 small and family businesses over the next 5 years. 100,000, by the way, we created just last year. We've cut the small business tax rate from 30% to 25%, the lowest small business tax rate in 50 years. We're offering new tax incentives for small business to invest in skills, in digital technology and improve their energy efficiency to get their costs down. And we've expanded the instant asset write-off through to 2022, 2023. Our plan invests in infrastructure and skills development to upskill our workforce and meet the demands of a growing economy. A plan to open the pathways for young people into jobs, with 220,000 apprentices currently in trade training right now, the highest number since records began in 1963. There's an additional $3.7 billion to support 800,000 new training positions. We believe in training Australians. We believe in training Australians. With more low and free places under Job Trainer also. 478,000 places already created in areas of skills needs. We're delivering the big infrastructure projects across the country, as the Deputy Prime Minister knows and leads us, and well done, Barnaby. Nation-building projects. The Melbourne to Brisbane Inland Rail. The Beveridge Interstate Freight Terminal, where I was the other day in Beveridge, opposed by Labor. The Western Sydney International Airport. I didn't talk about it, I started building it. Upgrading the Bruce Highway here in Queensland. Working with the Western Australian State Government to build Metronet over there in Western Australia. You know, I really do want to pay tribute to the Deputy Prime Minister and his predecessor, Michael McCormack, for the much work that has been done before him. I know Barnaby would have joined me in doing that, but particularly I want to pay credit to Barnaby for this, for his advocacy on behalf of regional Australia. In this budget, in this budget and in our plan, we're undertaking transformational investments in regional powerhouses to unlock the wealth of the regions, because as Barnaby says, if you want the stuff on the boat coming in, you've got to be putting stuff on the boat going back out. So we're unlocking the Hunter, we're unlocking the Pilbara, we're unlocking the wealth of the Northern Territory and the region known as the Middle Arm. We're unlocking the wealth of Central and North Queensland here in the great state of Queensland. We're investing $7.4 billion in more dams, water projects, alongside our record $120 billion infrastructure pipeline. Affordable, reliable energy with lower emissions is also part of our economic plan. Affordable, reliable energy that Australian businesses need to power ahead. And we can do that at the same time as reducing emissions to achieve our net zero target by 2050. We can do it while reducing household electricity bills. They've fallen by 10% electricity bills since I became Prime Minister. Our approach is based in reducing emissions on two core principles. The first one is that it's technology, not taxes. That's what solves this, and not just here, but across our region, across the world. We can't just address it here in Australia, and we want Australia to be part of the economic opportunity that comes with addressing those issues with greater technology in areas such as hydrogen and others, which will be of great economic value to Australia. But secondly, we will not leave regional Australia behind or make them pay for these commitments. We are building major new clean energy investments to provide affordable and reliable energy. Down in Tassie with the Marinus Link, the battery of the nation. In New South Wales with Snowy 2.0, and well done Angus Taylor. And in $1.5 billion of hydrogen investments, including major hubs in Gladstone and in Townsville here in Queensland, as well as in Darwin, in the Pilbara, in Kwinana, in Port Bonython, in Bell Bay and the Hunter. You know, advanced manufacturing and collaboration to achieve that is really transforming our economy. We are implementing our plan to secure sovereign manufacturing capability in this country. We're making things here, and we make great things. And we have a plan to ensure that Australia keeps doing that and be the first place in the Southern Hemisphere to manufacture mRNA vaccines down in Victoria. We're bringing universities and businesses together through our Trailblazer University program, incentivising collaboration and rewarding researchers for their commercial success. And today I'm pleased to announce that the final 2 of our 6 Trailblazer universities will be right here in Queensland, with a strong footprint in regional Queensland. The University of Queensland will lead our food and beverage manufacturing Trailblazer in partnership with QUT and the University of Southern Queensland. This is an investment of some $50 million from the Commonwealth, and that has attracted a further $110 million in co-investment towards developing new agri-food technology. This is how you grow an economy. This is expected to create 1,700 new skilled jobs by 2035. And the University of Southern Queensland will lead its own regionally headquartered Trailblazer in Toowoomba. There we go. Geared towards building Australia's sovereign space capability, partnering with the University of South Australia and the Australian National University. USQ will accelerate the development of launch technologies as well as build job-ready skills from STEM to space engineering. Together, our 6 Trailblazer universities are creating 170 industry partnerships, generating an estimated 7,400 jobs and attracting more than $1 billion in co-investment. Now, I appreciate your patience today, ladies and gentlemen, but as you can see, I got a big plan. I'm seeking a second term because I'm just warming up. So let me give you some more plans. Let me tell you some more plans. Australian families need to know that their government can fund the essential services they rely on, not just talk about it. Another reason why strong economic management is so important to our everyday lives. You may think he's the Treasurer, but in a way, he and Simon Birmingham are the Health Minister as well. Because if they don't do their job, then Greg Hunt wouldn't have been able to do the magnificent job that he's been able to do as our amazing Health Minister. We're providing record funding for health, education and aged care. Medicare is guaranteed by a strong economy, as is funding for our hospitals that grow year on year. We're providing a record $3 billion in investment for mental health services as part of our mental health and suicide prevention plan, which has been a personal mission of mine. We have struck agreements, and I want to thank David Coleman, on mental health funding with every state and territory. A joint investment of some almost $8 billion that will help improve the coordination of care for some of our most vulnerable Australians and address the suicide rate in this country. We've approved new or amended listings of some 2,900 medicines on the pharmaceutical benefits scheme since we came to government, including new medicines for prostate cancer, for breast cancer, for cystic fibrosis, and for spinal muscular atrophy, just to name a few. Our fiscal management means we can continue to list these new medicines on the PBS and make landmark new investments in health as well, like expanding the eligibility for continuous glucose monitoring services for all Australians with type 1 diabetes. We'll provide significant new investments for all of those who are here today from rural and regional Australia, my wonderful rural and regional team from the Liberals and the Nationals. We make major commitments on rural health workforce, making it more affordable also, I should say, to access IVF services. There's increases for perinatal mental health support through the Gidget Foundation in particular. We're helping women who suffer with that terrible ordeal over their life of endometriosis and provide additional funding for medical research. Now, I'm sure we all know that in our own lives, there has been someone, indeed perhaps even yourself, who's been touched by cancer and impacted by cancer. There's approximately 150,000 cancer diagnoses in each year in Australia. And to support these Australians, in the last financial year alone, federal government expenditure for cancer treatments, research and screening and support programs was almost $5 billion, was $4.95 billion. Australians can access free screening programs for cervical cancer, for breast cancer, for bowel cancer, and we've made additional investments to support women with ovarian cancer, an absolutely awful and devastating cancer. We have supported access to new treatments in Australia for cancer, including the game-changing CAR T-cell therapy, which was previously unavailable by going overseas. It happens here in Australia under our government. And whilst Australia has some of the leading cancer survival rates in the world, with a 5-year survival rate of 70% for all cancers, we are determined to do more. And that's why today I announce that we will put $375 million on the table to establish a new comprehensive cancer centre right here in Queensland. Right here in Queensland, to provide world-class cancer care for Queensland cancer patients, combining research, diagnosis, treatment and care through a comprehensive cancer centre that is proven to lead to better health outcomes and a great chance of survival for patients. But it's not just in Queensland we're doing it. This builds on the commitments that we've made, Michaelia, in Western Australia and to all our Western Australian team, and to South Australia, Anne and Simon, to complement existing centres that are in Victoria and New South Wales. And we will have established a national network of comprehensive cancer centres as a government. These investments in health and cancer care are only possible when you can deliver a strong economy. Because if otherwise you're just talking about stuff. You can't deliver it without that. And the last area I wanted to touch on today is that a strong economy is vital for the defence of our nation. The benign security environment that Australia enjoyed, and indeed most of the world, the Western world, enjoyed from the fall of the Berlin Wall to the global financial crisis, that's history. That's behind us. We live in a far more dangerous and disorderly world. And that has been most significantly demonstrated most recently by Russia's barbaric invasion of Ukraine. But here also in the Indo-Pacific, we know we face rapid militarisation as well as increased malign activities in the form of espionage, disinformation, cyber attacks, foreign interference and economic coercion. In this environment, the last thing Australia can afford is weak leadership. And that is why I am so proud of my security team. I'm very proud of Australia's Foreign Minister, Marise Payne. And I'll speak to the others in a moment. But she understands and she champions this every single day on the job, and she never rests. That we want an open, sovereign, Indo-Pacific region free from coercion and hegemony. A region where all countries, large and small, including our Pacific family, of course, can engage freely with each other, guided by international rules and norms. We also need to be realists, as Maurice is, to protect ourselves and stand up for those who'd seek to coerce us. We must continue to harden our defences and build our deterrent capability and defend our values wherever they are challenged. I can tell you, Peter Dutton understands that. As does Melissa Price, building on the world's most successful border protection regime in the world that stopped the boats once again. John Howard did it last time. Tony and I did it this time. Ended the deaths and closed the detention centres. Building on the laws to counter foreign interference and espionage, our stronger foreign investment laws, our laws to make our critical infrastructure more secure, including from cyber threats. And Karen Andrews has been a very strong Home Affairs Minister, and she follows, I like to think, not a bad line of them over the last few years. I'm sure Peter agrees. but she's prepared to do what it takes to enforce our laws and protect our borders. That's her day job. It's also a night job. She does it every day. And so does Peter Dutton, a great Queenslander and a great Defence Minister who is revolutionising our Defence Force with a 10-year defence plan worth more than $270 billion. An investment in state-of-the-art ships, vehicles, aircraft and equipment delivered by Australian workers. We're committed more than $100 billion over the next 2 decades to develop a sovereign Australian guided weapons enterprise. And in the budget, we announced the largest ever investment in Australia's cyber preparedness, which Peter led. A 10-year, $9.9 billion investment in offensive and defensive cyber capabilities, because we know that in any conflict, the first shot fired won't be in a metal case, it'll be in bits and bytes. A strong economy is the reason why we can continue to build stronger defence capabilities and have turned around the appalling situation that we inherited when defence spending fell to its lowest level since prior to the Second World War. Additional investment of $454 million to accelerate the Loyal Wingman project, which I announced today. This is a next-generation stealth, unmanned aerial vehicle leveraging artificial intelligence to support manned aircraft to conduct air combat, reconnaissance and surveillance missions. The first military combat aircraft to be designed, engineered and manufactured in Australia in 50 years. How good's that? World-leading, first of class, the investment will fund the build of a further 7 aircraft and the establishment of more than 120 additionally highly skilled engineering and other technology jobs, particularly right here in Brisbane, Rossvasta. Ladies and gentlemen, I began this campaign by explaining why I love Australia. And we all do. Of course we do. I love Australia and Australians because of our hope. I love their optimism. I love their kind-heartedness to one another when it really, really matters. I deeply admire, as Josh and I know, their resilience as we've gone through this terrible pandemic. I admire their aspiration, the aspiration of Australians who want the best for themselves, their families and their fellow Australians in their own community and across our nation. A lot like those trade students, Luke, that we met at your old school here in Brisbane, who plan to run their own businesses, more than half of them. How good is that? As a Prime Minister, you pour your heart and soul into this job every single day. You do all you can to help Australians achieve their aspirations. You don't get everything right. I've never pretended that I have, but I tell you what, I never leave anything on the field. It's a great privilege to serve in this role. It's the great professional privilege of my life. And I'm seeking a second term to ensure that we can take this to the next level, to those better days. We have worked so hard together, friends, to get to where we've needed to get to. We have worked so hard, and our plan will take us to where we've been working hard to get to. Our team will continue to put it in every single day because we all love our country and we love our fellow Australians. We know that our effort depends on a strong economy, and that's why this election is a choice about who is best placed to manage our $2.1 trillion economy into the future. A choice between a strong economy or a weaker one that only makes your life harder, not better. A choice between a stronger future or a more uncertain one in an already terribly uncertain world. A choice between a government and a Prime Minister that you do know and a Labor opposition that you just don't know. Now is the time to seize the opportunities we have worked so hard for to create that better future for Australia by supporting your local Liberal and National candidates next Saturday to deliver more jobs, to get unemployment below 4% and to get the skilled workforce to go with them, to deliver ongoing tax relief for workers and small businesses, to provide cost of living relief now and manage money well to ensure we keep the pressures down on cost of living into the future. To give more Australians the opportunity to own their home with their own money. To invest in those better roads, the better rail, the water infrastructure and the renewable energy. To guarantee record investments in health and other essential services you rely on. And to keep Australians safe by investing in stronger defence and securing our borders. Together, we're building a strong economy and a stronger future. Let's not turn back now. Thank you, everyone.
Bringing you every big moment from the campaign trail. This is the Sky News Election Channel, Channel 603.
This election is about you, no one else.
The people united will never be divided. The people united will never be divided. The people united will never be divided. The people united will never be divided.
The revolution won't be televised. Government been telling lies. If you're not with us, you better step aside. Witnessing a genocide, everything is centralized. The food that we consuming, they spraying it out with pesticides. Easily identify the sheep and the snake, the real and the fake, giving us a reason to pray. I'ma make my own choices, a voice for the voiceless. They trying to destroy us, avoiding the poison.
I have always believed in miracles.
National unemployment rate at the moment is, I think it's 5.4.
You will not comply with the institutions. Sick illusion, no, it won't be televised. Welcome to the revolution.
Thank you to everyone for tuning into this stream today. My name is Connor from 246 News. We were not allowed into this event. just to make it clear, we were given the invitation to fill out the form and we were not invited, so we did not come. However, we were glad to show you this event remotely. On our poll here, 50% said they are Scott Morrison's Liberal supporters and 50% said they are not Liberal supporters. We're going to end that poll right now. Please subscribe with all notifications on, and please head over to our website, 246news.com.au. Please share this website, and we're being censored on YouTube, so sign up and subscribe there. Thank you very much.